well over 20 years. Conrad's laboratory is a full-service laboratory with an emphasis on implant cases and large restorations. Recently, Jack Marrano, who is a materials expert, joined him and rounded out the whole picture for the laboratory. And as a company, as Argen, we have the pleasure of working with them. They work with our materials, and they're going to show you some cases today that I think will just blow you away. So Jack's techniques and his application of materials is really unique, and it's a pleasure to have you and have you here learning from him. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Chicago 2019, where does it go, right? And I can see by the looks of everybody here that I wasn't the only one that didn't spend the night at Big Bar last night, right? Maybe somebody did. This guy right here did. So yeah, it's great having everybody here. We're really, really excited. We got, let me move this down, a lot to talk about today. In fact, I think they gave us an hour and a half. We could have probably gone 3.
Yeah. But it's lunch, so we're not going to keep you in lunch. We'll make sure we don't. So, you want to go for it? Or you want me to go?
No, go
ahead.
All
right, we're gonna ad-lib this today. So, for those of you who can hear my voice, I'm foreign. I'm born and raised in South Africa. Came to the US in '99, but I don't always sound like Bonnie Tyler. It's just, Chicago week. We're expected to do the same workload in half the time, and if you're going to get sick and you're going to speak in Chicago, it's going to be that week. So Monday morning, one of my team members walked in and sneezed and coughed. And I was like, Lindsay, didn't need to mention you. I said, what are you doing? It's a Chicago week. She goes, I'm not contagious anymore. So I'd just like to tell you guys, I'm not contagious anymore. And if you do wake up with the sniffles on Monday, it's going to require a blood test to prove it's mine. So, those of you who know Michael Clark, I got a call from Michael a few months ago, and he said, Conrad, I need you to speak on something. And my position at Absolute is product development, implant dentistry, larger cases, guided surgeries, all those things. And I'm like, I can't speak on a technical stage. I need somebody professional to come and show us these things. So Jack and I have these collaborations, we call it. And collaborations normally go hand in hand with some red wine and maybe a cigar in the hot tub. And we'll solve the world political issues, and we'll get into religious things, and then we get into tea. So I said, Jack, what are we talking on? Are we talking on, do we buy a carbon printer? Everybody's talking about that. I said, do we talk about, should I go digital? Should we go digital? If you ain't digital by now, you need to be digital. I said, let's come up with something really cool, something nobody else is going to talk about, zirconia. Nobody else talks about zirconia. So we said, let's put a little twist on this. And we're going to take you on a journey of zirconia. We're going to show you how he does it, how he does his magic. And I want to show you at the back end how we put all this technology together and how the new zirconias is finally bringing the digital link back to the analog world. And I really think that's the advantage of where we are. So our lab is in, we like to say Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We're actually in Durham. Now, Durham is not as cool as Chapel Hill, so we'll settle Chapel Hill because it's close by. We've been there for 25 years now. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary. We're in North and South Carolina. We've got some boutique labs in Wilmington and the Triad, and just opened one in Charleston. So our whole idea with Absolute is to keep it specialized. Jack has got his specialty, my business partner, Tracy, everybody does a small part. So we don't throw a case in the front end and it goes back. If it's a big case, it goes to Jack's signature department. If it's a diagnostic wax up, it goes to Drew. So we try to keep things separated. And the whole idea with a bigger lab is if you can make it small, everybody only has 10 case bands. And if they have those 10 case bands that they're good at, then you basically have 10 small labs in a big lab. Not always as easy, but we try our best to do this. So I meet this fellow, and we started early on in hybrid technology, all on 4, wrapped acrylic. We started seeing failures. So we were, not much into dentures. I always giggle when I'm in a meeting and the technician says, well, denture teeth looks much better than ceramics. It shouldn't. And that's why we started with cobalt chrome, because it gave us the ability to bring pure artistry into these hybrids. So my belief has always been, you can hand wax them if you need them, you can do metal occlusions, you can do everything you need. And the results that we get with this, our master ceramist Hyun-Soo Kim has kind of made it his life journey to really be a master in doing these layering cases. And I looked at Jack, I said, Jack, it's pretty good work we're doing there. What are you trying to do with zirconia? And he's talking about zirconia and the digital link and how it makes us more efficient and how we can teach people to do 2 or 3 cases a day versus this takes 3 days to layer on a bench. So I said, Jack, I've done zirconia. See how that lower blends in with the upper? It's a little bright maybe, a little square on this one. That's my best work right there. Really went for that toilet bowl look. It's not really my work. We just Google this. But that's always been, you didn't think I would stand up here and show you that. So I'm not that brave. And I looked at this, through the years we've seen these zirconia products just being functional, just really nothing you can show on stage. Jack looks at me, he goes, are you insane? That's what zirconia looks like. And my first thought was, layered zirconia. It's like, no, it's monolithic. Because the real magic in zirconia is if you can keep it in monolithic, uncut backed. That's not really a word.
But it sounded good. It sounded good, but I want to make a note too. I myself was a traditional, I've always been full arch, full mouth, right? Metal ceramics, been there, done that with you guys. Crazy huge frames. Back then it was casting. It was a miracle if you got that thing to cast, right? Now notice, for about 10 years I've spent my life with zirconia, Conrad, cobalt chrome, Jack, zirconia. I still have all my hair.
True. I didn't even thought of that.
I'm good. I'm doing pretty good. I lost some patches here, but other than that, most of it's still here.
Jack hasn't seen himself from the back yet. We'll show you that later. So Jack and I start arguing about, how do we do this and what do we do? And Jack says, think about expectations. When I started this in 92, 93, Willie Galler was the big name. Everybody wanted to go to Willie. I wanted to go to Willie Galler. I want to see how he layers 28 layers in one crown. I had to fly to Switzerland, pay $10,000 to do it. And you can't really understand him, so you go back going, oh, that was beautiful, but I still don't know what we're doing. And he said, look at expectations. When we're as technicians look at this, we're going, how many internal layers can I layer into a crown? We look at our clinicians, they're looking at this saying, is it going to match? Is the margin going to be right? Is the occlusion going to be right? How much am I going to pay for it? And how quickly can I get it? And then we go to our end line consumer, and they're like, will it look like a tooth? And how long is it going to take? And how much is it going to cost? So we quickly see that the expectations change as we go from manufacturing to consumers. So the question is, how do we define a layered crown in 2019? Because I think if we can define that layering is a transition, layering doesn't necessarily equate to a brush in porcelain. And that's where we were sideways with this. So we start having these conversations, and Jack goes, I'll take this one level further. Are we craftsmen or are we artists? I've always looked at Hyun-Soo and say, what an artist. What can this guy create? He goes, no, we're craftsmen. We're not artists. And so I Googled and I said, what's a craftsman? It says a person skilled in the technique of an art. I said, Jack, got you there. We're actually artists. Then I look at an artist, one who professes and practices an imaginative art. Line angles are not imaginative. They need to be copied, which means, yes, to a point, we might be craftsmen. So I look at the Mona Lisa worth $890 million right now. And I thought, why is that so special? Knowing how to mix paint doesn't make you an artist. And it's a very true statement. If we know how to work with the material, we can be craftsmen. It doesn't make us artists. So I look at why people adore this painting, because it's not really very pretty. And somebody came up with the golden ratio. If you hook something in her left nostril and you draw a line around her head and to her left shoulder, look at the ratio, 1.618. And I look myself, I've seen that somewhere before. Golden proportions, which means artistry and craftsmanship is a very, very gray line of what we're dealing with. And that's a good place for us to be. So Jack goes one step further. He says technology is the bridge. And I can honestly stand here today and tell you, after working with this artist, craftsman, for the last year and a half, what he's going to show you today will bridge that gap between artistry and technology. So I always like to bring something from the past in to kind of show you where we've been. And I know as technicians you agree with me, we've all been there. So I'm going to set this up. This is a little infomercial on Home Shopping Network out of the 80s. And there's two people in this commercial. There's a lady, which will play my business partner, Drew. And then there's the gentleman, that's me. And I'm always, when I speak clinical, somebody will ask me something, I'll say, yeah, we can do that. And then I call Dries, I'm like, you better figure out how to do this by Monday, because I just told him on stage, this is possible. And this is what happens between the two of us. So he's the lady, I'm the gentleman. And this is where we end up sometimes.
That don't lock. Firmly in place, so really, you're all set. And this is tough. It is. Listen, give you an example. Say you have you have to get up on the wall, high swing ball. Right. Hey, listen, just walk right up.
Look at this. Somebody come look at this.
It's very safe, it's durable, and lightweight. Oh, really? Wow. Now it's locked in place. Okay. So really, you say, oh God. You say, oh God. You say, oh God.
And it goes on. Only difference is, he doesn't go, oh my God. He goes, what the hell did you get us into now? And that's the danger with where we are. So much technology thrown our way, so many things we got to look at. But I really believe that what Jack's going to show you today is going to really make a difference. So I want to end my little part of this intro with looking back at the old absolute versus the new absolute. And we had the numbers run on this. Fixed hybrid is about 16-hour labor time. And remember what type of labor it requires to hand layer a full upper rehab. When we go to a monolithic tie base, about 7 hours.
Right. And if I may interrupt, Conrad, so right there, 16 hours if nothing goes wrong. How many of you have gotten in there and started building up those giant metal ceramic hybrids, and on the glaze you blow a bubble, or you throw a crack, and then you throw another crack, and then you're chasing it, right? So that 16 can turn into 20 like that, if you don't have to strip it and bring it back, right, and start from scratch. When we look at zirconia, we can see that our labor is 7 hours, but that's not just for one. That's 7 hours labor. That doesn't mean if you got a flow going on, right, that you're not rotating, let's say, 2 through the oven at once. So now that 7 hours at 74% margin is actually 2 arches, right? We're talking about the business side of it, which is like the bad word nobody wants to talk about. You hear about business, or if I mention making money, everybody wants to look like this and say, that's not artistic, right? And so really, at the end of the day, whether you're the ceramist, the lab manager, the owner, we have to make money. We all have to make money, right? It's just a better, how do we go about making that money? And what really comes down to in a lot of ends is quality of life, right? One time years ago, I tell this story all the time, I was talking about it again last night. I had a Dr. Young technician early on in my career. I was all gung-ho. He called me a starving artist. A lot of you might have heard me talk about this story before, and I went home and I'm like, yeah, I'm the starving artist. And then the next day it was dinner time and I'm like, what are we gonna eat? Because I'm the damn starving artist. It's not a good thing, right? I was, that was like my trophy, put it on the shelf, hang it on the wall. So then I really started thinking about, okay, how can I start making this work for me, right? Not sacrificing aesthetics, still getting that high-end, high-level work, right? But just doing it in a smarter way. And that's kind of the journey we're going to take you guys through today.
So if you look at old absolute, new absolute, it's craftsman versus artistry. But I do think there's a bridge between the two. And like Jack said, now you can scale this. For the longest time in dental technology, we could not scale what we're doing because it's hard to duplicate hands. It's much simpler to duplicate what Jack's going to show you. So Jack, I'll stay back and let you show your magic for a little bit.
Right. History of zirconia. So this has been, it's fascinating if you've watched it and worked with the material over the years. There's a lot of folks in here, you're probably old Chicago veterans like myself, and everybody can remember coming to courses when zirconia first came out. Zirconia copings. In courses at that time, how to build those ceramics up on those copings to get them to look somewhat decent, right? And that was a coping. That's how ugly the damn material was. It was really, really that bad. And from that point, we kind of progressed. And back then, still, we were relying on what we considered the master technician, right? There was at that time lots of masters. There was these groups of individuals that we would consider the ones, the holy anointed, that we had to go to kind of learn how to do these techniques, right? As we're going forward and the materials are getting better and the technology is getting better and the techniques to post-process those materials are getting better, less and less are we relying on those limited masters and more becoming our own masters at the laboratory and master labs, right? Where everybody should be able to do this. If you come and see me on a Friday and we're teaching a course, you should absolutely be able to go back on Monday and do what we talked about on Friday. If not, then I'm standing up here and it's only a trophy show. And I'm not doing any justice for anybody in the room, right? And I don't believe in that stuff, and I never did. We look at Zirconia, and historically, that's kind of where we started out. When we went the big full contour craze, there was white and ugly. That was our choices. And we tried external staining it. Then came the middle one, which was absolutely disastrous for a large part, which was infiltration, right? When we started infiltrating in the laboratory, you seen all types of crazy stuff. I mean, and it was really breaking some laboratories down. Then we had to work on techniques to help us infiltrate better and get more predictable results and get better shade accuracy. Then we took that and modified that and did the minimum cutback technique, right? All this time just trying to take the material to get it to where we can be able to work with it in the mouth, to where it was aesthetic. We were doing all this work to kind of force it. And I'm really glad we did, because it needed to be done. When we're talking about cutback techniques, and I started these early on, we talked about that you wanted to leave the incisal ledge. You didn't want to take it off. You were just going to take that facial layer off, right? The problem with all that, and it worked back then, and you see my contact area is still in Zirconia. My incisal edge is there. I did the best I could to maintain the data, the information. The reason why is because now we have the ability to design in full contour, right? Doesn't make any sense to me. It's like ceramics. When I used to build ceramics, I would build it up the first bake, the second bake, and it would drop on the model, right? I wouldn't build it up the first bake and then grind it all the way in and then build up a second bake. It never made sense to me. This is kind of the same concept. It didn't make sense for me to go ahead and have that power to design that restoration, and it was done. Occlusion, function, incisal edge, everything was determined. And then it was gonna come out of the mill and I was gonna cut it all off. It drove me nuts, right? It was absolutely crazy because it was such an inefficiency in the laboratory. It was a redundancy of efforts, right? So then we went and I started modifying it and said, well, I'm just gonna do the incisal third. I'm gonna do like an Emax thing. Still trying to maintain as much information as I could without removing all of that material. I threw this up years and years ago, and I still use this slide. And there was a gentleman in the room, and he was very angry. I threw this up there, and he said, that didn't come out of the mill like that. And I said, no, it didn't come out of the mill like that. The mill is gonna get you like 98% there. And then we gotta sign it, right? So I'm not gonna use the word art. I'm gonna say sign, and that's what I've done on those restorations. And I can make them look like anything you want them to look like. The area that we're concentrating on now is ceramics. Is very limited from what it used to be before. Before we used to establish occlusion, we used to establish function, we used to do all that, right? In this now, as a ceramist, this is my window to apply my artistry. I used the word, and apply my artistry. I made it right? But that's it. That's where I work and nowhere else. And because I work in that area, that's something that can be trained and passed down to the other technicians, right? It's very, very easy. And whether you're looking for standardization of your laboratory or whether you're looking to be able to pass the torch to another ceramist to free you up, but you want to keep that look and feel of your restorations, we can do that. Or whether you just want to do it for yourself, that's where we work. That's where the improvements come from. In this case right here, this is old. This is an old case. And just talking about some of the inefficiency and redundancy, this case was done at this point, okay? But back then, because the materials were not there yet, okay, the technology and the materials had not married up. So what did I have to do? When it came out of the mill, I had to cut it all back. And then I had to come up and invent all these new techniques, right? Because now I have to still make it aesthetic. So now I'm restarting, I'm rebuilding, I'm redoing my own work. It's a huge inefficiency. Here you can see that I applied the Zerliners and some stains, right? Minimal cutback, so that I could come back and apply very little porcelain. Oh, it's not actually there. But it looked really good, believe it, me or not.
I took it out.
It's live TV. It didn't look good. It looked great. Don't listen to them. So when we talk about cases in, again, full contour or monolithic also is a dirty word, right? I don't apologize for making money, and I don't apologize for doing what I truly believe in. I had somebody one time, I was consulting in the laboratory, and the owner said, she said, I won't sacrifice aesthetics. I said, good, damn it, because either will I. Now let me show you how I do it. You're not sacrificing aesthetics if your restoration, if you used 8 powders, when you get done with that A2 molar, it's still A2. All of that in between time that you spent didn't make it any more, you didn't sacrifice anything by doing it any other way, right? If we look at this case is interesting because this is a case that all of us in the room as ceramists would look at and say, that's a bear. That is gonna be a bear. So not only do we have, it's gonna be a custom abutment, but we have a big, nasty metal post right on that other central, right? What are we going to do? And then comes out all the techniques and indifferent materials and techniques to get the indifferent materials to match. And how are we going to block out the custom abutment? And so on and so on. And ultimately trying to match that very, very translucent 7 and 10, right? This is a tough case. It looks very, very simple. It's a tough case. On this case, and to show you where the materials have progressed, I'm going to show you what I did. I'm not going through the whole entire case, but to give you an idea, right? This one would give all of us in this room a very hard time. But the one difference with me is what I did is monolithic zirconia, okay? That's monolithic zirconia. That is not layered. I did not take out porcelain powders. I did not build them up, right? But define layered, because now I'm going to tell you it's layered, so I'm going to contradict myself. The definition of layered, all that's changed is the definition, how we kind of relate it to the final product. This is layered.
And I'll jump in here. My business partner came to me and we said, if we do monolithic zirconia, multi-layer, theoretically, we can still charge for layered zirconia. And he said, I'm not sure we can do this. And the more we talked about this, now it's a definition of where does it get layered. But it is still layered because it's still a transition. Layered ceramics is transitional ceramics. Monolithic transitional ceramics effectively is the same thing. So for us in our lab, we're trying to eradicate these layering techniques as much as we can. As long as we can get the same aesthetics, it's ultimately the same product. Much stronger, gonna last much longer.
And again, never sacrificing aesthetics. That's the key, right? That is truly the key. If you can do that and you didn't sacrifice aesthetics and you did it smarter, faster, better, and made more money, I said it, sorry. And you know what, and you went home and maybe sat on your deck and had a beer, right? Where otherwise you would have been working all night at the lab. That's the difference, okay? When we really start breaking it down. If I was to tell anybody in this room, I should have put this slide up for and what we did earlier and go ahead and layer 12 porcelains in there and get a palette the size of this stage and lay out all the colors so that I could show you guys my complex build-up technique like my comb over, right? But then come back and show you that it was just layered, it was monolithic zirconia, but it's layered from within. We just redefine what layering means now. So when I do it, I'm going to go through real quickly. A lot of you that have seen me before or seen anything I've done, that's it, right? Dries is right there. He thought this was the craziest thing in the world. I showed up at the lab and I threw, those 5 burrs down on the table, and that's it. That's all I use. You don't need any more than that. I really believe you've got to keep it simple, right? The simpler, the better. Overcomplicating it doesn't do any more for you. Not only is that all that I show up with, but I use that is going to be PMMA. I use that on zirconia. I use that on green stage zirconia. I use that on layered ceramics. I use that on anything that comes across my bench. That lineup right there.
I will
Okay?
say that my bench and Drew's bench looks way more professional than yours. We have the nice carousel with all the birds.
Well, and Dries says to Conrad, he says, he's only got these 5 things laying out there. How the hell is he going to make anything, right? So that's kind of what we talk about, and we kind of laugh. And now, now you got the technicians are coming back saying, hey, what was that diamond you were using, right? So it's just the way that I use them. I'm going to throw it in there too. You did not see a high speed. Please don't use a high speed on your zirconia. Chest pains, right? So we're going to talk about protecting the zirconia as we're moving forward. This is just wild polishing paste. I polish the undersides of all the hybrids. If you're going to polish it, use the number 9 short, stiff bristle, right? This is a funny slide. I put this up there. Conrad's like, really? That's what a slide you're going to use? But it's because you go to polish it. How many times do we get all the bristles? They shoot off and they get down your shirt. It feels like you just got a fresh haircut, right? Use the short stiff, it won't do that.
I have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
I did.
At one time. And then, of course, just rubber wheels, right? And that's basically all that's going to touch the restorations in the laboratory. This one's really cool. It's a Scotch Brite. When you're working in green stage zirconia, you can just take off the scratches real quick. It's super, super easy. We're going to get to a case here pretty soon. Diamonds, I stopped buying diamonds like 5-6 years ago. I just use these again. I use these for everything. I cut the green stage zirconia. I cut Emax off the blue block. I open embrasures on PMMA. You could use it on layered ceramic just with those Rensburg Brilliant discs, all right? This one's a big one, and I've been showing this for a long time. And I tell everybody, when it comes to zirconia, whether it's a 3-unit bridge, whether it's a molar, whether it's a full arch, if there's failure, catastrophic failure, it's really, really easy to find the culprit. You can usually find it lying within 5 or 6 things, and you can find it really fast. But that being said, 50% of the time, it was compromised before it even left the laboratory, right? And still, I've been preaching this now for years and years and years up on this very stage somewhere, talking about zirconia is a common sense material, right? So respect the material, and it will respect you. The second you don't, it will come right back and bite you, okay? Zirconia is odd. It's not like metal. You can't hit it with heat really fast and really hard and then throw it wide open. You got to bring it up very, very slow. Let it absorb that heat, that energy. Let's not even call it heat. Let's call it energy. It takes all that time to absorb that energy, and then it doesn't let it go easy. It wants to hold on to it once it has it. So then we got to bring it down all the way down, right? If you do that, now this oven, your oven cycles will run about 40 minutes now. Then when it comes out, it's still got to sit on the tray for another 10 minutes, right? So if you don't horse it, that is the best thing you can do to protect that restoration, right? And if the doctor did everything on his end and you did everything on your end, you're not going to see catastrophic failure, especially when we're talking about full arch stuff, right? So, and this is a program that I use right now. It's very, very important. Also, don't bash your zirconia with the steamer either. It's kind of bad stuff. And I'm always talking about everybody being the master. I always tell everybody, I'm not special. I'll tell you, I don't do anything special, right? And then, some of you will argue me and we'll go back and forth. I've known Jose for years and years and years, and he laughs at me when I say that, right? But Jose will also know that I'm a firm believer that everybody should be able to do what I'm able to do. This case right here, Ivoclar asked the laboratory, said, hey, we want to go ahead and present a case with you guys. We want to publish a case, right? Conrad, Dries, and I were like, we got a perfect one. Yansu Kim, a master ceramist in the laboratory, right? He's going to go ahead and work on the case. Look at this poor gal. She's got all types of issues, right? Conrad, why don't you talk about what she presented clinically?
So she had cleft lip surgery. She had osteotomies. She went through everything that you can imagine at a very young age. And she said, I got to 22 years old and I just gave up. So I was just done with dentists, done with all these surgeries. And to make it a little bit worse, great commercial year for cigarettes and Mountain Dew. She was half a pack of cigarettes, which is always a full pack. She was drinking 6 Mountain Dews, which is probably 9. And sipping on a large sweet tea, because we're from the South. And we drink sweet tea cold. Now, being from South Africa, that was the weirdest thing I've ever heard of in my life, because we drink tea with milk in a cup at 4. Not at McDonald's, a half a gallon of sweet tea that beats out your teeth like this. So she went through this, and then all on top of that, she had Sour Patch Kids. Cannot have a better treatment plan for a patient. So we're all excited, and we talked to Jan Sue. We're like, Jan Sue, we're going to publish this case, but it has to be monolithic. That's the whole idea. We want to stop you from layering. We want you to start showing us what you can do. So we started with the posteriors. Jan Sue spent some time. We did 2 quadrants, went back to the mouth. David Hedgecoe prepped the uppers, and really one of our fun clinicians to work with. He gives you what you need. So he'll put this patient in a temporary chair side, and he'll work out all the details. Up to this point, our biggest problem has been how do we transfer that back into the final? Jack has mentioned it a few times. Once we have to do cutback, we have to rebuild everything we've done. So if we can digitally control this process, then we know that what we were given is going to go back in the final. So we import this data into our 3Shape software, and since the ability came out for us to model match, the technology has really started to make sense, because now we can look at our pre-op, that's what the patient approved, we can model match that in our software, and now we can do fine-tuning changes, excuse me. So you can see what we did, we broadened the arch just a little bit, very small changes needed on this case to give Dr. Hedgecoe and the patient what they wanted. But now we know exactly what we're doing is going to translate back. So we'll go on a team view with our clinician. Very seldom would we have the patient a part of this, and then superimpose that back in and say, that's what we're proposing. So now we can look at it. It's still a little chiclet looking, 3Shape is working on getting better color on these things. But it gives us the ability to see we're going to have a very long number 10, and how are we going to deal with this? So first tryout, patient wasn't too keen on pink tissue, so 8 and 9 was a little long. We really convinced them to change those interproximal line angles with a little bit of pink and add a little tissue recession. But ultimately the case came out pretty decent. She wanted it kind of brightish, whitish, but we had good translucency, good levels. So look at how close we got to matching the temp. So there's no surprises for this patient on the back end. If we had to hand layer this case, aesthetics wouldn't have been much different. But the process of getting here is so unpredictable, and that's where we've been. And where we're going is basically copying these cases. So at Absolute, we look at these and we're like, yeah, we're excited. This is beautiful. We took some pictures. Okay, Hedgecoe sent it. It's like, tell Jan Sue, great job, buddy. As good as we can expect for where this patient started. And if you look at just the eyes, and how that changes in a patient like this. A patient that basically gave up on her dentition and ended up from that to this. Now I will say Dr. Hedgecoe managed the patient. No more Sour Patch Kids, no more sweet tea, no more Mountain Dew. And that makes this case something that will survive. So, we're a team at Absolute. If somebody does a good case, we publish it, we give them kudos, we want to make sure that everybody gets it. So I post this on Facebook. Zirconia by Jan Soo Kim. So he calls me, he said, gotta take that down. I didn't do that case. I'm like, Jan Soo, you're supposed to publish this case. You didn't do it. So I get there the next morning, and I'll give you a little insight behind the curtain. And Jimmy Liu, one of our great technicians, does smaller cases, posterior single crowns, a couple of anterior bridges. He goes, yeah, I did it. It's like, I've been working with Jack a few weeks now, a couple of months maybe. Right. He said, the case showed up on my bench. I was like, maybe they want me to do it. Grabbed it, finished it, glazed it, sent it out. And we're like, wow, we just took one of our smaller case technicians and turned him into the next master without even knowing we were trying to do that. So the message that Jack brought with this material is, you can be the next master, and we are the next master.
If I would have told him that before he's seen that without this case, he would have thought that it was probably out of my mind, right?
We published this case, and I don't think we ever told anybody that our master ceramist never touched this case. He actually did the posteriors, which is a really good place for us to be. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a side journey, and then we'll put it back on the Zirconia. Where we are as dental labs right now, it's extremely important to be a resource. The days of just doing single crowns, and I remember in town we had a few labs that said, I don't want to do anterior work, send that to absolute. I'll take all the posterior crowns. We'll just deal with this because it's much easier. Those days are over. We've got CEREC machines out there. We've got printers coming. It's going to eradicate those small cases. So if we're a resource to our customers, then we can really do something from the front end to capture those referrals on the back end. I've always believed right from the start, the best way to get referrals is through your surgical accounts. Surgeons fight for exactly the same business we do. When a surgeon goes out and finds these referrals, on the back end, somebody has to restore that case. And the prettier we can do that, the more of these referrals we'll get. But it's different nowadays because with digital technology, like we said, we can model match, we can do diagnostic wax-ups, and it gives us the ability to superimpose back into the patient's mouth. Now that diagnostic wax-up is worth something, because we can take this diagnostic wax-up and transfer it to surgery. Now we have a conversion denture that actually replicates the final. Then I'm going to throw some iJig technology on the back of this, and I'm going to show you how that link really makes you a huge asset to your clinicians. Now remember, in our industry, it's not just about who can make the prettiest teeth. Drew and I have always argued about this. Is it about quality? Is it about service? I'm telling you, it's about quality and it's about service. And then you have to have the products to outperform the guy next door. And that's what this technology is finally giving us. I'm probably going to lose my voice before the end of this. Jack, I hope you know my slides.
I got it memorized.
The diagnostic wax-up for us is now very simple. And we had a lot of pushback in the beginning because my clinicians would go, I want to put it on a handle. My orthodontist, my prosthodontist said, I made you a custom guide table. Remember those little red things that always stayed in the case band because we forgot to use them on the handouts? And they're like, I want to go back to those days. But what they realized was if they team view with Drew, he can say, lengthen the cusp, it's 2 millimeters, and let's look at protrusive. Let's look at how that influenced the case immediately. We now have the ability to put this in a surgical part. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what the new surgeries can do for us. And there's multiple companies. You can, I encourage you to go talk to Jay Watson from Chrome. They're looking for lab partners. They're training all of us to do this. And basically what these surgeries are doing is it's a buccal base guide. And that buccal base guide gives us a reference point back to the lab. We have never had the ability to have that base guide to guide us to final conversions. For those who've ever been chairside with the conversion, Henry is here. It's hope and pray that everything is going to go well because by the time we have all the teeth out, we're just squeezing this patient back into vertical. What we do now is those are latched into that base guide and everything goes back on as a diagnostic wax-up. So our patient is leaving after surgery with a functional prosthesis. That becomes the basis of how we go on to our final. Now that link, and I'll run you through a little surgery real quick. We did some quick extractions because we do the planning and we can guide our surgeons right from the start. We're going to have undercuts, extract those teeth, lay a buccal flap, and now this base guide goes on. I'm not going to get into the surgery as much as I want to show you the link for us digitally. Everybody knows that a tooth-borne guide is way more accurate than anything else we have. So if you latch it all together, we have a good place to latch these things, drill the fixation pins, take that off, and from this point on, we do bone reduction. Once the bone reduction is set, we can now do upper and lower at the same time. Now, anybody that's ever been chairside with one of these surgeries would tell you upper or lower, full extractions, bone reductions, implant placement, and conversion is suicide. We did this entire case by extracting everything at the same time. And the reason this is so successful is because we have a jump back to our articulator. And we have the ability to mount the case post-surgically. So we know that we can do extractions and not lose vertical. Our vertical is latched back into our denture or into our conversion. So I always do these consultations and patients look at me and they go, is this going to hurt? And I go, it's not going to hurt me. But if you've seen the movie Soul, that's kind of what I'm not saying that, I'm just thinking. And I say this tongue-in-cheek, and the reason I say this is look at what we have on our model. It's the ability to take the segmented piece of teeth and bone and remount the case as if we're post-surgical. So we can segment it in the data, we can remount the case, take the teeth off, throw them away, and replace it with our diagnostic wax out. That's a huge advantage because now we're diagnostically treating this patient from the start, like a prosthodontist wants to, and not just putting somebody in a vertical occlusion. So now it's bone reduction from this point. You can see we completely destroyed it. I worked with Uday Rimai on this case, and I said, Uday, you feel like living a little crazy this morning? I said, we'll do this case, and we will not mark the nose chin. I will lose all my vertical. If this doesn't work, we're dead. I said, let's do it. So we never marked the vertical because we trusted this. After that point, all the reduction is done. Latch that denture back on. And remember, this denture is no longer processed. It's milled off the data. So that's PMMA. If we really want to do something nice, we'll do double cross-link PMMA. And we can put something in there really aesthetic. Perfect occlusion after full extractions, bone reduction, and 8 implants placed. That took us no more than 2 hours. It used to take me 2 hours just to get to the conversion, or just to get the conversion done. So that's really helping us. From that point on, osteotomy guide, drill the osteotomy, place everything is done, guided, and we line up our hinge positions, and that lines up our abutments. So everything is chosen from the start. They get a box, it comes in. When we get to this point, line up the screw access with the little dot on the guide, and everything lines up. And like I said, there's multiple systems out there. We love working with Chrome. I'll talk about that in just a little bit as well. But go to these guys, they'll train you, they'll get you out there, they'll make you part of this process. So at this point, everything is pre-cut, everything is ready to go. We latch the denture back on, lute everything in place, and while this surgeon sutures up, we take that back to the lab. We use Boco. If you ever do pickups, I don't get paid by these companies to say it's a truly great material. Take that back to the lab, cut it off, and we replace everything back in the mouth. Now we have the vertical, and that's how our patients look immediately after surgery. Isn't it funny how you always see these beautiful women advertising single crowns and these kinds. She's never had a crown in her life. But she's not actually an actual patient, but that's what we strive to. So talk a little bit about the different systems out there. Chrome, the difference Chrome is that the guides are actually SLM in alloy. Huge advantage. If that buccal guide fractures, it's a bad day for the surgeon. Everything gets balanced on the tooth structure, so we have a occlusal guard that seats that guide. And the main difference here is it's a floating guide. You can see that the guide is not engaging the buccal bone. Now that's an advantage if the data wasn't clear. If the data wasn't crisp, and we do that buccal guide and it doesn't seat, everything else is off. Now the first systems that came out like this were based on bone level. So if our surgeon didn't set the bone level correctly, the occlusion would be off. We don't care about the bone level because everything is based off this guide. You'll see the osteotomy guide is also SLM in Chrome. You drill that, you have your positioning indicators, you can place your abutments. And another great advantage, what we love with this is, you can see the little conversion denture does not have latches on it. It actually sits on these little links that slots onto the guide, lute it in place, take everything apart, take the guide off, suture back up, put your denture back in. So what I'm trying to say with it, there's multiple ways for us to get to the same results. Everything based on guided technology. Now this is probably the most innovative thing I've seen in my career because this changes how we do things. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what an iJig is. iJig basically helps us to restore a hybrid in as little as 2 appointments. So run this down, I'll give you a quick run and I'll slow it down a little bit. And we call it 1 hybrid, 2 appointments. What it allows us to do is take the converted denture at surgery state, take that out. When our surgeon does his implant testing, talking, scan that with eye flags, make sure that that goes back in the patient's mouth, scan the bite, scan the opposing. So what have we done? We've just locked in all the diagnostic work we've done right from the start. That gets sent to Absolute. We now create that, and the IG goes back in the mouth. This is the first restorative option. It's the first appointment where the restorative dentist is going to look at this case and say, how do I restore this? Place that IG back in the mouth, piece by piece, doesn't depend on how you do it. Lute the sections together. So what are we doing right now? We're basically verifying that impression. So no more products that doesn't fit. Snap a few diagnostic pictures, send that to the lab, take an impression on the intaglio, and I'll slow this down after this, and then the patient goes home. Next appointment is either final delivery or transitional delivery. This is used to be a 7-appointment process that we can now cut down into 2 appointments. Very predictable appointments. So what I try to do when we do one of these cases is have one of my team members chair side to walk our clinicians through this. Once they walk through this, we know we have the right data and everything is predictable from there. So let me show you how we do this. Transitional comes out, and this is normally at the surgery process. Remember, your surgeon has to torque test the implants after 3 months. The hybrid has to come out, and this is the best appointment to do this. Take the hybrid out, place your scan flags. These are just lab analogs, and you can get these through Chrome as well. And scan that denture. Scan intaglio, scan upper, scan lower. What we do now is scan opposing, scan the bite, and you send the STL. Any scanner works. Doesn't matter what you have, as long as it's an STL file. So that data comes to us. Now we'll do a diagnostic. So if you have good diagnostic pictures on this patient, what we can do is say, what did you want to change? That's worked into the software to create the IG. So it's not just verified, it's also a diagnostic wax-up. So what have we done? We've canceled the first 3 appointments: impression, bite trim, tooth trying. And how many times have we done tooth trying, tooth trying, tooth trying, tooth trying? Those days are over. That saves 4 or 5 appointments easily for these patients. Now we're going to go, and I'll show you, we'll mill this out of a solid puck of POA to make sure that it's strong, that replicates what we need. And that replicates the patient's existing. The difference is, what we used to do is take the bite at surgery stage. That bite is not reliable. This patient has been in this hybrid for 3 months. We know exactly what that patient wants and what they don't want. So the diagnostic changes are easily made, and then we'll put back in. The way we deliver this is in 3 or 4 pieces, split between all the implants in a little delivery tray, and that goes back in the mouth. So let me show you how this works clinically, and then I'm going to have Jack tie all of this back up with the transitional and then the final. So we drill little screw access out. If there's no Teflon tape on those screws, pretend like you have to go to the bathroom and get out of there, because that's a long day to drill those screws out if someone didn't protect them. Take the hybrid out, and now we're going to place our IG. The IG can go back in as one piece in the tray. What I found chair side to be a little easier is just to position it piece by piece and line everything up. Because remember, everything between is sectioned. Once everything is lined up and in place, and I'll use sometimes the tray just to deliver the posterior ones to get a little closer. Now that we have this, we're basically going to lute the sections. And we want to make sure that there's space between the sections, because we're verifying the impression. We're trying to make sure that that impression is accurate. Lute it with a little composite, flowable, temp acrylic, whatever the clinician prefers. And from that point on, it's diagnostic adjustments. Now remember, we should be very close because we're working off the patient's hybrid. Make some adjustments, take some smile pictures, ask the patient what they want, ask them what they don't like, and then we're going to take that data, we'll take an impression between the intaglio, we'll leave these little injection ports, take an impression between the intaglio, and then send that back to the lab. So instead of us now getting an impression back, we get an iJig that transfers all this data, and we simply place our lab analogs in there, pour the model, mount it, and now Jack can do his magic, because now we have everything we need. So we decided to go transitional on this, and this is really where this hybrid technology is helping us. So Jack, we get away with the hybrid.
Yeah, so of course, in the iJig, to me, the first time I seen it was one of the best things I've seen, always restoring for a full arch, full mouth. And working with Conrad and Dries and seeing more of that surgical side, now we're both kind of coming together. Because you would be looking at, let's say, average minimum 6 appointments. That's if you're lucky, right? How many appointments are needed just record gathering to get us to, let's say, a PMMA phase? And then how many times do we bounce a PMMA back and forth, right? It's an absolute killer. I used to consider the PMMAs the ultimate master record, right? Until iJig, where we can capture all that initial information and data very, very early on and then transfer it throughout the rest of the case, right? This is where we're really, and you guys have done awesome, is we're going through this journey, but we wanted to show you from surgical all the way to the final restorations, then in Zirconia and exactly how we did it, because it's a huge, huge path that these cases go through. Their lifespan is incredible. So this is going to be the PMMAs. Of course, the mill only gets you so far, right? It's going to get us 90% there. Everything that's valuable to me has been captured at that point. And I'm not actually going to go through, everything as far as how I work on the PMMA with you guys today, but I use, for example, Shofu light art, right? I've been using it for years. Here I'll use Palaceal glaze, the pink, which everybody asks me about, right? Very, very important, because at this appointment, we have to verify everything that we have. So gingival architecture, right? Tooth form, tooth arrangement, all of that information to be verified. The pink that I use is just simply triad. Triad base plate material. That's it. I don't use Gradia. I don't use any of that stuff. I don't spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on it. I take a strip of triad light cured base plate material. I peel it off and I mash it on with my thumb. And then I cut it away, and that's what's left.
Does it bond?
It bonds. And if you really, really want to get an extra bond or get SR Connect, if you've heard of SR Connect, if you really, for me, I don't use it, but if you really were concerned about that, put the SR Connect layer on there, then come over with the Triad, right? But that's just base plate material. Really, what we have here, and I'm going to show you, if you look at the difference between the two, right? The little bit that makes this stand out so much from the previous out of the mill and the post-process is so simple to achieve. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that.
So Jack does this on this patient, and because we had to do a patient for this meeting to get all the new materials out, that's the temporary. So I said to Jack, are you insane? You put a temporary like that on? Our final is never going to match what we did in this temporary. It's like, you little fake, just back off a little bit. I'll show you what we can do.
By the way, all right, this was, we just delivered this case. When did
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. It was not my idea to do a full mouth case prior to Chicago. And get the, so thank you, Mr.
It can be done in 3 weeks.
But we did, and it came out great.
So we'll show you, and this is the delivery. She's a friend of ours that's been through a lot, and this was the temp delivery.
Temp delivery for the provisionals.
Wow. Lord, I don't even know what to say.
She went 3 years. 3 years.
It's just temporary, right? I don't even know what to say. Wow.
See a big old smile. Perfect.
And I think now the question is always, how much effort do we put in the temporaries? Do we make them look like a denture? With this new material, it doesn't take much longer to create natural beauty. And then wow that patient even further when we put the final in. And that's a huge showcase for our lab. And it made a big difference in Brenda's life. Let me just advance this for you.
Interestingly enough, and I didn't spend that much time on show, because we got so much with you guys. We probably can turn this into a 6-hour lecture series with you guys on every step of the phase. But we wanted to pack as much information, as much value in it for you. At the very end, we'll really get down to the nuts and bolts of how we're doing this and how everybody's becoming the master. But for the PMMA, you'll see that there's very little that I do differently post-process out of the mill compared to the Zirconia when it comes to finishing it, right? Again, same burrs, same everything is going to be used to do the PMMA and the Zirconia.
So now we'll go do a triage scan. And it's not often you see a temp on a triage scan that looks pretty good. And then we'll just do the same thing over. Import that back into our diagnostic software, into our reshape software. Now we can make small changes. And you can see very small changes were needed here based off the pictures. Now think about this. We took the blue straight off the converted denture through the iJig technology. So we were extremely close to what that patient wanted. Raised up number 9 a little bit, and then we add our pink tissue. And that's where Jack truly starts his magic.
Now you're going to notice, and this is very, very, very rare that we get to do this, but our patient Brenda wanted a very natural smile, right? So we kicked out those laterals. We brought in the 2 lower centrals, brought them out, tucked back the 2 lower laterals, right? And that's exactly what you want. It's not that often that you get to do that. So when we follow this case through and you're like, wow, that's incredible, but I can't sell that at my lab, I completely agree. Rarely do we get this kind of opportunity to go ahead and apply that kind of natural look and get away with it, right? You got to know who you're working for. So don't go back and drop in all this crazy staining and that and kind of root form, you know, and gingival recession. Be like, oh, I seen Jack do it in Chicago, right? Because you're going to get the case, but a good chance you might get the case back fairly quickly. But
so let me just interject this. So hopefully Brenda is watching us on Facebook Live.
Is that Facebook Live?
Brenda specifically requested a layered case. Because Brenda's old school. She started with
I'm in
us.
so much trouble.
Brenda, till this point right now, believes that this case in her mouth is layered. So Brenda, I have news for you. Your case is not layered. And we'll show you why Brenda, till today, actually believed it was a layered case. So take it away.
So using Argen HT+, and in this, Brenda wanted to go for about A2-ish, right? But I used the A2 light. Went ahead and milled out those double arches. These double arches are going to be the exact same files that came off those PMMAs, right? This is where the predictability comes in. If we're having to do, you know, facial layering and things like that, then we lose a lot of that data that I've already established and I already know is verified, right? So we're going to go ahead and mill out these arches. You know, and again, the green stage finishing, this is probably really the most important part of the process. Now, how much you do or do not put into this process is the determining factor of what your case looks like on the back end. Us as ceramists, we now work here. This is where we live. Now, in a production setting, we were talking about it and saying, and I've heard this before, oh, I can't green stage everything. You know how much time that would take? You're right. And you don't, right? You green stage what you're looking for. So it's going to be aesthetic cases, 6 through 11, things like that. But if you got molars and premolars coming through, now there's no need to go through and put this level of detail on there, okay? Now, when we're doing this case, again, using those Rensburg discs, the most important part of this entire case is right here and right there. That's what your eye draws to, and of course, midline, right? If you nail these 3, doesn't matter what you do in the rest, right? Now, it's interesting because if we all sat there and we each did one of these, we'd get 10 different results, but they should fall along the same lines, or you could utilize the same techniques to go ahead and finish this, right? This is just all done with the diamonds. Again, remembering and respecting zirconia. If you got a screw access hole back behind this, you're not cutting into it. You leave it. Don't compromise it. I also don't cut around back onto the lingual palatal side. That's not how it's meant to be. You're not gaining anything by ripping that disc across the occlusal and back onto the lingual. You are building in a compromise, and it can break and fracture on you. If you have cantilevers hanging off the back within the proper spread, leave them. They don't need an exaggerated embrasure, okay? They really, arguably, should or should not be back there in the first place, right? Don't run your disc and zip it around there, okay? Protect the material, it'll take care of you. This here is just surface texture and anatomy. It's those same diamonds. This will all start off with that flame, and I'll kind of run that fat tummy right through there. And then just a little surface texture here, wearing it down. This is going to be with the rubber wheels, okay? I'm going to come back with that same taper diamond. I'm going to put my wear facets in there. This is the big one, and always has. It is far greater of a task to work on gingiva than teeth have ever been. right? It really, truly is. And at this point in this, and notice there's not a cutback for layered ceramics. I'm not going to get out powdered gingival ceramics and apply that. You're going to see what I'm going to actually do moving forward. And I'm able to do this in full contour because of the advancements in zirconia and being able to use HT+. HT+ gives me high strength, high translucency. So I'm going to stay monolithic. I'm not going to do a cutback because you don't need it. We'll take a closer look. You can kind of see what I got. Very, very important when working on these cases, and these are truly the cases that you're going to green stage, over-exaggerate everything, okay? Because when you're going ahead and you're finishing it down, if you put it on exactly how you think it's perfect at that moment, when you center it, it's probably gone, right? So if you're uncomfortable and you're squirming in the bench chair when you're looking at your case and saying, wow, this is pretty rough, just center it. Trust me, it'll come out and be exactly where you want it, right? So over-exaggerated, again, I can't talk about these embrasures are the most important. I'm not going to sacrifice my restoration to get them, but if I got the material there, I'm going to put them in, right? You could also see that in these embrasures, I want papillas, but I've removed the papillas, right? Because I still have material to come back through there. And if you leave everything, you're going to end up with just a wall, and that's where zirconia arches look very, very, very fake, right? So you want to make sure that those embrasures are opened up if the case allows you to. Now, on this one, and it was funny because I didn't know if it actually worked, but with Argen's incisal liquid, I went ahead and put this on the A2 light and just put a little splash on there for the incisal color. Didn't know if it was going to work, and I would have really been screwed if it didn't because I didn't have time to mill it back out and center it again. So I was kind of rolling the dice and the sweat was coming off my forehead, but it made sense to me that it would work, and I'm really glad that I put it on because it did work and it came out perfect. So this is immediately after center, and this is really when you start to gain the value. We haven't removed any information. Everything that, when I build ceramics, right? And you can see I'm kind of twitchy and I bounce around. It's like a touch of ADD, right? I only built ceramics and layered ceramics to get to the end, right? Because that was the most important part to me. So I went through all this process and all through this procedure just to get to the end to finish the case. That's what we have here, right? You see that the HT Plus presents very natural shading, very nice translucencies. We're still monolithic, all right? Little closer look. And this all happens, this is where we do our ceramics, is in the green stage. Now I'm going to come back and stain them, right? This is really going to bring them to life. This is stain and glaze techniques based off of what we already know as ceramists. I'm not doing anything special. You have dented, you have incisal, and you have incisal effects, right? As ceramists, you already know that, and you know how to build those into your restoration. Now take away the powders and use stains in lieu of the powder, and that's what you're going to do here, right? If I showed you this case, like I show most people, like Brenda now knows, I'm sorry, Brenda, they believe it's truly layered, and all it is stain. This right here is going to be my Mio. I believe it or not, I stopped layering gingival ceramics and I started applying the Mio. I do it a little bit different. I got to give a shout out to James Choi. That was really the first time that I seen somebody do it, and it made sense to me. And from that point, that's what I've been using. So there's still not going to be traditional powdered layered ceramics on this restoration, okay? Also, while we're at it and giving credit where credit's due, Mr. Enrico Steger, because all of this would not exist if he wasn't the first man to say, I'm going to put a full arch of zirconia on those implants, right? And that's from there, it has been birthed and went crazy. So I basically take the Mio and I'm going to trace my gingival architecture. Oh, there we go. I'm going to trace my gingival architecture, go around, and just bring it down. Now, while not bad at this point, it's still kind of ugly. This is just a stain, right? We really got to add some character to it and bring it to life. So we're going to add some different colors in there. All right, you can see some things here and, you know, little whoop-de-woos down here. And that's generally going to get us where we need to be for the next stage. When I'm applying this around the cuffs, I basically just use a little plastic stick. I'm not even using a brush. And I just trace them out and go all the way around the arch, then I drag it back down. This restoration is all techniques that everybody in the room can do, right? There's nothing, it's a lot of times you say, well, no, I can't make it look like yours. No, you can't make it look like mine. You're going to make it look like yours. You know, you are the master of your own restoration. And it's something you can actually go back and do. This is going to be the structure. I use very, very, very little structure, okay? Basically just adding texture. That's it. Right here is like 1/10 of a millimeter of it on there. And then I dab it with a little micro brush to pick up some texture in there.
That's still Neo.
That still is. It's not fired yet. Right, so that's just applied. So if we look, that's going to be the structure applied. I took the picture, threw it in the furnace. Okay. Same thing down here. Again, the staining, all in right here, important. Those are your most important areas. At this point, no structure has been applied. That's straight stain. Okay. 90% of the gingival that I do and 90% of the teeth is straight stain. All the effects come from your stain, not actually from the ceramic material. And this is what we come out looking like. This is HT+. This is monolithic. And even Brenda herself, still up until this point, thank you, Conrad, because she is going to kill me on Monday, thought that this was a layered case, right?
Now think of the advantage. We have 750 megapascal shear strength.
1250.
1250 on HT+.
Excuse me, Argen. Didn't do my homework on that one. And so we're not going to chip those cusps. And back to Jack's point, it's post-delivery issues that cost us money. If you think about one remake on a posterior crown, costs 3 crowns to make up the loss for that one. If she doesn't chip this case, we don't have to redo it. She thinks this is layered, and it is as good as any layered case out there. So the final result is ultimately what we're looking for with a much better long-term predictability. So that's the close-ups. Fortunately, like you said, she wanted them to be a little all over the place.
She wanted them natural, and this is where, you know, in this situation, and by using HT+, if you were to use a more opaque zirconia, you would have suffered, and you would have had to cut that zirconia back and apply that minimal layering. By using HT+ and gaining that translucency, right, and gaining that high strength, I'm able to do it monolithic. Therefore, keeping all the data, keeping all the efficiency, I have no redundancies, right? Then we come back and all of that information that Conrad had worked up early on in the surgical, everything we did in the preliminary, we can follow it all the way through to the finals. That's as predictable as it gets. And name your price, but let's throw 5,000 on an arch, right? And 2 of these can be done at the same time. That's when you're talking about 74% gross margin, not 1. Let's call it 2. My record is 4. Don't talk to me that day. I'm a savage and I'm angry, right? It can be done, all right? But I am in motion. Don't come within 12 feet. That's a danger zone. I was a Marine. It could get really, really scary quick, right? So, but that's rolling them in and out. So if you come in and you have 2 arches like this, right? Remember, 74% margin. Or how about this? How about I'm Jack the Ceramics? I don't know if I'm necessarily that concerned about the margin. You know what I'm concerned about? I'm concerned about going home at 2:33 and throwing some meat on the grill and drinking beer, right? Or going fishing or what have you. Whatever it is your passion. It's a quality of life issue, and it just makes sense. So, again, Argen HT+, it was a straight killer. This is going to be Brenda. Let's wrap her up.
And after 3 years of walking this journey, it could not have ended any better for her. Really one of those cases that was predictable from not necessarily the surgical aspect because we didn't do guided, but once we got into the transitional hybrids, from that point on we knew exactly what this patient wanted and we could predictably do that.
Well, and you know, it is when we're talking about everybody being the next master, layering aside. So there's no layering applied. There was layering, but again, layering's been redefined. What is the layering? The layering is the material. The layering is the staining technique, right? Relying on our skills as ceramists to reapply it just in a different way. With the advancements in zirconia material, with HT+, high strength, high translucency, we're able to do this restoration without losing all that valuable information. So important. It's so very, very important.
So I'll end with this, if you mind. Dries came into my office on Wednesday and it's like, I've been hearing you and Jack talk about artistry and craftsmanship, and Jack is a craftsman and nobody's an artist. He said, I don't care what Jack Marrano says. That guy's a damn artist. Jack, I will tell you, you're an artist. All these arguments we've had, what you've created and what you've done is really, really commendable. And I'd like to compliment you on stage. Jack is down to earth. He doesn't mind sharing his opinions, his knowledge. He does a lot of consulting with labs. If you want Jack in your lab for a Saturday, give him a call. His info is on the table. And he will share this with you. Jack joined our team 8 months ago, and he changed our lab. Our posterior technicians are now masters just because they replicated 5 burrs instead of a whole block. I'm truly honored to be on stage with you. You have shown us a whole different world, and my whole team will agree with me on that. Since you joined our team, it's been predictable. It's definitely been something that we can now take forward, and we can scale this. And scaling is the one thing I think that's important.
Most important.
So our contact numbers is on there. You're always welcome to contact Jack. With that, we're a little over time, but we'd like to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, we'll be around.